Hi, grammar and writing students. I'm trying something new. I'm trying a video with our Unit 9 critique information uploaded, and I want to make sure that you have that. I know that I did have some questions from parents last week about the Unit 9, and those have been posted. So they were posted last week. And I'm just going to scroll through this quickly so that you can see what is in the file. There are some examples of critiques. There is the specification sheet at the beginning. And I don't see the outline on here, so I can send that separately. But I can also show it to you on this video today. So what we were talking about is something I would have preferred to have talked about in class, preferred to have had students ask questions, but writing a book critique and writing the persuasive papers it's an intro in 7th grade and you get it again in 8th grade, which you will have me again next year for. And so we will begin the year with a critique, and we will begin that year with a critique on Tom Sawyer. So you will need to finish reading that, even though we're coming close to the end of the year. You will need to finish reading that. Then we'll do a brief re-intro in the fall, and we'll be writing a critique on that book. So a critique, I often get asked how it is different from a book report. And a book report is just merely reporting, here is the character, like for Tom Sawyer. Hopefully you've read enough that you know who our main characters are. So in a book report, you would want to identify the main characters. And so a couple of those would be obviously Tom and Becky. And so you would want to tell me that, use good descriptive words to tell me that Tom is a wonderful, maybe that's sarcastic, wonderful young man, middle school age, who likes to get into mischief. He probably wears jeans that are torn and dirty t-shirts. I mean, you would tell me all about that in the book report as you're describing the characters. And Becky, you would tell me that she's the sweet girl that wears bows in her hair and all of that. Then you would also tell me that this is an exciting book, and you'd tell me a little bit about the plot. And you might tell me one or two instances or examples of things that happen in the book. But what's different with a critique is that you're critiquing Mark Twain and his writing. Now, the other night, my husband was asking me about a book that I was reading, and so I was doing a little bit of a critique with him, and I said, well, the introduction was really good. The author pulled in some other literature, gave herself a nice foundation, gave me something to kind of stand on as she presents her argument. But then I proceeded to say, but in chapter 1, her argument was very weak, and she didn't substantiate it enough with factual information or whatever. I was critiquing the book. I wasn't just describing the book to my husband. So the critique piece is that you're kind of, we wrote critiques earlier in the year, and you are giving Mark Twain a thumbs up or thumbs down on his book. So we're going to go through a little bit of the pieces, and these are broken down into 5 pieces, and this is what your outline will be based on. Again, I don't see the outline in this packet, but we'll send you the outline. An introduction, it's going to tell me about the book. Tom Sawyer, what year it was written in, who it was written by, Mark Twain. It was written in the 19th century during a time where poverty, long summer days, and you're going to describe the book to me. So you can see here, you want to pique the reader's interest in this, and you might want to give a quote. You also want to give basic information about the book. I've already mentioned that, even the publisher. you can give this information in any kind of order. That's what that means. The order of this information is up to your individual preference. You want to use critique type vocabulary. I'll also provide some of that for you. But things like, enjoying the author's style, his use of humor, in keeping the reader engaged. Though that's a literary vocabulary. The characters and setting is going to be your first paragraph. And that's going to be, I'm going to work here with Tom Sawyer. And you would want to highlight your main characters. And so you would probably list first Tom, and middle school boy, you want to tell me about his aunts. She's strict. Rules, he doesn't like the rules. You want to tell me about Becky, Jim, all of the characters that are in the story. You're actually just giving me a little bit of information. You're going to pretend that I've never read this. So you're going to rattle off the main characters, and then you want to tell me about the setting. Midwest. Warm. People have a lot of time. It's one of those, they're probably sitting out on their front porches. It's hot. They're maybe bored. I think that's where your kids get into some trouble. So you want to set it all up for me. And that's what it says in here. Describe the exposition of the story, which includes the time and the place. And so the time would be that 19th century. You want to give me, I'm sorry, I skipped where I was here. Sorry about that. You want to tell me the relationships between the characters. Maybe introduce me to some of the problems that we have. With Tom, one of his problems is that he needs to do work. He doesn't want to do work. And so he's always looking for ways around that. So you can introduce in a minor way some of the problems. You want to, again, use vocabulary. The main character. The author introduces an evil dimension into the story. So you're using particular literary vocabulary. Tell me the mood in the story. You don't need to necessarily worry about topic and clincher sentences in this paragraph, but you can introduce, your paragraph would start something like the main characters in Tom Sawyer. And then as you end, you want to transition into the next paragraph. So an ending sentence for this paragraph may move into something like, with the characters determined to enjoy their summer, their adventure begins. And then you move into the second paragraph. In the second paragraph, let me scroll that up so that's at the top. The second paragraph, you want to state some of the problems in the story. And so we have several things that are going to be interesting to talk about in this story. We have Becky and Tom getting lost in the cave. We have them observing their own funeral. We have, some of the little minor pieces of little shenanigans that Tom gets into. We want to explain what the main character wants, what they think, what they're going to do, how they're going to solve their problem. Again, you're still using critique vocabulary. Again, you don't have to use topic sentences, topic and clincher, but you do want to do some kind of intro and then transition into the next paragraph. So, for example, I might list in a second paragraph that Tom, and I keep grabbing the wrong marker here. Tom bored. Doesn't want to work. He creates adventures, I would say. He works hard to not work hard, if that makes any sense. We could talk about them going to the cave. They exploring through the cave, being alone in the cave, kind of build up the action in that. I actually prefer the funeral story and them observing their own funeral. But in the second paragraph, where you're doing the conflict in the plot, you want to paint a couple little pictures for me. You want to tell me about some of the adventures that they have. And then let's say that we decide to have the big climax be around the adventure in the cave. We would list what's happening. You know, the last candle gets used up. Candle goes out. No food. Becky becomes lethargic. So we're building that conflict up. And then you want to resolve. You want to tell me what's happening. And so as you would go into this paragraph, you might introduce it something like there are several different things that Mark Twain does in this story. He shows the mischievousness of young children who are left unattended, or he shows you could turn that around and even say he shows the great imagination of young and middle school children who are able to find adventures and do a lot of exploring on their own time. So you could either you could really rail hard on Tom and criticize him, or you could say this is a wonderful portrait of children, using their imagination, and we should be more like that. So in that second paragraph, you want to highlight. You want to introduce introduce what this paragraph's about. You want to tell about a couple of adventures. And that you'll see that in that state the main problem in the story, beginning with the rising action and ending with the highest moment of tension. I always like to put a couple things in. So here's how I'd probably write it. There were several situations where Tom could have gotten into trouble. I might tell about the whitewashing incident in the beginning of the story. Then I might go on to talk about getting caught in the cave, and that might be the one then that I really build the tension in and then resolve it in the next paragraph. But I want to tell about the story, and I kind of want to give some kind of indication whether I think this is a good story, a bad story. Did I think Mark Twain went too far with it, or whatever? So you can give a little bit of critique there. But in the concluding paragraph, which is the third paragraph, we want to resolve the story. We want to tell the reader. I don't want to leave somebody hanging. And so in that third paragraph, Becky, we talked about her being lethargic. She's at the end. And then they're rescued and celebrated. And everybody's happy, and we go back to our wonderful West 19th century, sitting on the front porch, all of that stuff. And then I'm going to spend the last part of this talking about, kind of some of the relationships that are maybe repaired. Does Tom have a greater appreciation for Aunt Polly? Are any of the other relationships repaired? We know that there's some, I don't want to give away the whole story, but we know that there's some law enforcement stuff, and got to sort through all of that. So you can share that in the climax solution, and then tell me what you thought about that. Were you excited that they were rescued? How were you happy about that, or did you feel like Tom should have really gotten into greater trouble? And so you get to give me a little bit of your feedback. You are critiquing Mark Twain. I know that's a pretty big responsibility, but you get to critique him. And then finally, in the conclusion, this is the part where you get to put your opinion in, and it's just the same as a persuasive. You get to put your opinion in here. Don't use first person. Don't say I and me. Instead, you should say this book. Instead of I liked this book, you would say something like, this book was an excellent read and thoroughly enjoyed by many. So you're not using that I. What did you like about it? Did you like the adventure? Did you like the shenanigans? To give you some ideas for how you want to spend your time this summer. Do you feel like the author fully developed the main characters? Did they change? Did they become better or not? And if you don't feel like he developed a character very well, then say that. I've read books and I've finished and I've thought, well, what about that character? I wonder what happened to them. That's a character the author just kind of forgot. How did the plot affect you? I love Mark Twain. I love Huckleberry Finn a little bit more than Tom Sawyer. But it affected me because it actually takes me. Mark Twain is actually able to take me to the places that he's writing about. And I love his descriptive language. Was the author's style interesting? Was there a worthwhile lesson or theme? What can be learned from the theme? So those are some questions that you're answering in the conclusion. Now, since this is a harder book, I'm really looking for you to just be really rough draft on all of this. Just do your best, kind of looking through each one of these paragraphs. The thing that will be most helpful is to read through the critique samples if you have not already read them. There's 2 in here. And these are both just pulled right out of the IEW manual. So read through both of those critiques to see how they progress through the material. And then use the outline that will be posted on our student page or in our classroom. And again, just as rough draft as you can be, and then you're going to do some rough draft writing, and it might be really messy. It's not going to go to final, but I do want you to get some experience doing this because we will be doing it first when we return in the fall. So please let me know if you have questions. Some of you may want to set up a Zoom session, and I can, if there's several, I'll try to do it all together. Let me know if you would be interested in that. So do your best to work through each of this first page here is going to be the key part. And it might seem very clunky and it might seem disjointed. That's okay. Next fall, hopefully we'll be able to do this together. And we will actually do the Tom Sawyer outline together. So you're at a disadvantage. Just do the best that you can. And I will see about setting up a Zoom session if you're still having trouble with it. Thank you. I'll see you the next time.